today on Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond.
And I just realized, this is a symptom of this misbelief or this old, idea that we haven't quite caught up with, that we have to be a certain age. I decided, you know what? Forget that. I'm going to be a stand for the fact that we can do things whatever we want at any time.
Hey, Thrive Loud fans, Lou Diamond here. Video continues to be such an integral part of marketing and messaging your business. And many entrepreneurs and small businesses are a bit uncertain, even confused, about how to best create and deploy videos for their websites, YouTube channels, and social media sites. If you fall into this category, I have one word for you: Animoto. Join the millions of businesses, photographers, and families who use the power of video to share what matters most to them. Whether it's marketing videos for your business, slideshow videos for photography, or even slideshow compilations of family pictures, anyone can make great videos with Animoto. If you've been a regular listener, you heard Animoto's co-founder, Jason Shao, on the program share his story and how his company is helping so many people incorporate video into their messaging. After that episode aired, we had listeners, former Thrive Loud guests, and even yours truly use Animoto to help create effective marketing videos. So head over to Animoto.com, click the Get Started button, and use the promo code THRIVELOUD to get an additional savings. That's Animoto, Animoto. Make great videos easily.
Get ready to Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond, connecting you to the most inspiring and amazing people that are thriving each and every day. Today on Thrive Loud, we bring you podcaster, speaker, actor, and dancer. As host of the Superpower You podcast, she does long-form interviews revealing the mental models and tactical skills needed to be your very own superhero, which is why I like her, all about superpowers. She's been featured in over 100 films, television episodes, and movies of the week, and is a dance performer and speaker who inspires audiences to embrace vitality and passion and reclaim empowered living in later life. In spite of taking up dance at age 50, which I've met her in person, I didn't even think she was older than 25, but that's not important right now. She is a world champion pro-am American rhythm ballroom dancer. Thrive Loud listeners, Lisa Betts-LaCroix. Lisa, how are you today?
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for that amazing introduction. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Well, I'm so glad. So the Thrive Loud listeners need to know, I got to meet Lisa at Podcast Movement in Philadelphia, a big conference where lots of cool people like Lisa and myself attend. And we actually tried to record something on site over there and in a very weird space that we thought everything was going well, and it turned out it didn't go well. So we're back at it again. And here we are today, excited to hear her story. So Lisa, if you could, for the Thrive Loud fans who love hearing about people who have this diverse background, let's get a little bit of your journey. I kind of want to focus on what you're doing now, but specifically about superpowers, because I think this stuff is amazing, and kind of like walk us through acting into what you're doing now. And I think that will get us going. Sound like a plan?
Okay. Yeah, it sounds great. So starting from acting, I guess you could say that acting was my very first adult career. I started acting, well, I always acted as a child and as a teenager, but I started acting in my early 20s, and I had an amazing, exciting, really fortuitous, I'd say, career for about 10 years. And I got to do all kinds of amazing movies of the week and feature films and series roles on television episodes in both Canada and the States. And it was really an amazing experience. And the one thing that I like to say about my acting experience is that the acting profession is a very challenging world. And I always took it on as kind of like a martial arts mat, because if you are approaching that world from the perspective of just how can I be successful, or, I want to be a star or something like that, it can be very debilitating. And so I always took it on as the query of how do I stay centered in myself, confident about who I am in the face of blows here and blows there, because you cannot help but get blows in that world. So, that's the thing that I think back to on my acting career, and think that I've taken with me, that sort of idea about how do you learn and grow from any given experience.
Lisa, I'm going to jump in because I want to ask this, because I know you have a unique superpower, which we're going to kind of get to, and you love bringing it out of other people. At an earlier stage in life, and when you were doing acting, did you think that that was a component of one of your personal superpowers, something in the ability to play a role, or to transform a scene, or to act something out? Talk a little bit about that, just so we get a little understanding of you in the younger years.
I would say that I didn't conceive of myself as being this amazing actor and this is my superpower to play different roles. I think I'm not sure if I was even aware of it at the time, but to some degree maybe. And certainly looking back, I feel that the superpower that I approached acting with then, and that I do apply to my life now, is the query of how do we increase our range as human beings, right? So whenever I would play a role, I would look at it from the perspective of, this may not be me. This may not be who I am. And in fact, this might be a bit of a stretch for me. But how can I take growing in, like, how can I find looking for the parts of that character that are like me as a way of expanding my access to all that I am in the world and all that I am capable of reaching into myself for. So I think that is the piece that translates across the board, is that question of how do we become more? How do we grow ourselves? How do we just expand our range in all different ways?
I like that. That's like what we tell a lot of the people, my clients and companies I work with, in getting outside of your comfort zone. And that is exactly what stretching your range is, doing something that's a little bit of a stretch, and being able to have that flexibility, because the more you stretch and the more familiar you become with that turf, so to speak, you become more familiar with it and better at it. So it's a great point. Thank you for sharing that. I love that.
And I think that the essence of that is that there's no particular given trait or characteristic or skill set that is in and of itself better than another one. So for example, if you're someone who is very out there in the world I'll take it from an acting perspective, say in an acting role, I tended to be stronger in the types of roles that were, competent and confident and self-possessed and strong. That comes more naturally to me. For me personally, accessing the more vulnerable sides and the emotional parts of myself, that has always been a little bit more of a challenge personally and in acting, because they say that your acting problems are your life problems, that whatever you are in the world, those will be the same challenges that show up in acting. And so that doesn't mean that perspective or that part of my personality is better than someone who's more has more access to their vulnerability or their emotions. It just means that that's the place I need to stretch, and other people might need to stretch in the other direction. So, and I think that translates across the board. If you're working with people and, with your clients, I bet you would find and agree that they have certain skill sets, and they may need to, for example, if they're great speakers and orators and they're great people who can motivate other people, they may be challenged with, say, listening.
Yeah. It's a great point. It's sometimes when you're really strong in another, to be well-rounded is very difficult and takes a lot of work. And that ability to, kind of get out of the area that you're really good at, like in that example you just gave, that sometimes those that speak, they don't listen as well, or those that listened might not speak as well. It's good to get that ability to do all of it. Go ahead.
Yeah. And you know what? I want to jump in on that, because it raises the query of superpowers, right? Which is where we're headed.
Good segue.
And and the reason it does is because exactly what you just said is that we're always looking for the places that we're both strong and the places that we have opportunities to grow and opportunities to develop and improve, right? And I really have the premise that we are so much more empowered, and we can so much better empower other people if we start from strengths. And I'm currently grappling a little bit with this concept and this idea of, do we actually even need to go where the weaknesses are? And I can argue both sides of it, right? I can argue both sides of it, because I do think that, there's some power in saying, here's where I'm really strong and here's where I need to improve. But I've had an experience recently where in a speaking skills training where there was no room and no no real focus on what's wrong, that people can bloom in that presence anyway. So I think the idea of focusing on strengths first and looking at your superpower, it just has an enormous amount of impact in how we are ourselves in the world and how we support other people into their fullest potential.
So I think I have an yes and comment to that, because I think I have
a
good answer to this. I have dealt with people who've been incredible salespeople and top performers and have this outbound ability of connecting with people and closing business that are just super. Yet if I asked them to manage something, they couldn't manage themselves out of a paper bag. And I've dealt with people who have certain skill sets in, computing and coding and technology folks. And while they're great in the numbers and math, they're not so great with people. What I have learned is if you're in a leadership role, in a role where you're managing others, not just yourself, but you're a team builder, you do have to kind of step into these other areas that you might not be as strong as. I totally get with you that salesperson who might be incredible and outward bound, and you don't need them maybe to work on their managerial skills, or maybe a technical coder is never really going to get on stage and speak with people or even deal with clients, but is so good at what they do. You could argue, just as you said, we were talking about it before, going back and forth. I do believe, though, if you're leading people of that bit, you have to have the empathy to understand what those people are like, which means you need to kind of extend your range and work on some of those things you're not weak. You're not as strong as. So I think we're on the same page with that.
Yeah. And just in terms of a subtle refinement on that, or in addition, yet another yes and is, I think you're absolutely right. And I believe that if you're supporting someone in moving towards an area of greater challenge for them, that if you can double down and identify what their superpower is in the areas where they're strong and see if you can use that as a launching pad for the areas they're weak, you're going to have a lot more impact. And
perfect.
I don't exactly know what a specific example of that would be, but we could sit, but I think you get the idea, right?
Totally. I'm with you. Now I want to ask a question here, which I know the Thrive Loud community is excited to hear about. The Superpower You podcast. Talk to me about how this idea came to light and what you've been featuring on this amazing show.
So I'm a huge podcast addict. I love podcasts. I listen to them all the time. I'm a fan. And there are a number of shows that I discovered early on that I adored. And they included Pat Flynn's Smart Passive Income and Michael Gervais' Finding Mastery, and especially Tim Ferriss's show. Yeah. And I loved Tim Ferriss's show. I loved how he goes into getting to know people and identifying those abilities that really underline and support them being incredible in the world. But I really was listening going, okay, but where are all the women? And furthermore, how about a woman host? I guess Tim can't be a woman host, but so it was. My podcast is largely inspired by Tim Ferriss's show, in the sense that I'm always wanting to get to what are those pieces that make people just incredible in what they do in the world, and wanting to explore a wide range of topics, a wide range of skill sets, and, a wide variety of types of people. I tend to interview people who are not necessarily well known, but people who I know are incredible and, could well be in the future. And I aim for about 80% women and 20% men, because I didn't want it to be an all women show. Men are amazing too. I just wanted to kind of flip the ratio a little bit.
So I love asking this question, and it's really fun to sit in this chair and ask the question, because I know, like you, I speak often, and I have now found that after we have like over 250 interviews of recording, and I think we're up to like 180 by the time this one comes out. I would say that I've incorporated some of the most amazing nuggets of knowledge from my guests sitting in the seat as the host. Share maybe with us some of the incredible things that you have learned, or stories that have touched you, that really have almost inspired you personally, not just your listeners, because you had such a great connection with that guest.
Okay, let's see. I have had so many incredible guests, so picking one is really challenging. But I have to say, I ask the same thing of my guests who are podcasters also, and usually they say the same thing. They're like, "Do I have to pick?" So I guess what I'll do is I'll focus on my interview with Casey Baker right now, because I did just do a Women Speak Festival class with Casey the week right after. I went straight from podcast movement to Casey Baker's event. And I have an episode with Casey, and I forget what number it is. I probably can find it. But I think the thing that's so inspiring about what Casey says, and that I really relate to, is that her commitment to freeing her voice and to bringing her presence and her message for the world is never completely done until she has supported the freeing the voices of all women. And the message that she shares is that women's voices are critically necessary, especially right now. And we, it's imperative that we find those embodied. She's really about embodiment. I'm a dancer and she's a dancer. And a lot of it starts with, how do women empower themselves by actually finding their sense of themselves in their bodies through movement, and speak from that place in a way that is really radically different from the traditional, more masculine model of speaking and projecting our voices forward. And it's not that men can't use some of the same aspects. It's really about feminine voices, right? How do we access the feminine parts of our voice? And that really has to do with authenticity, embodiment, emotionality, being emotional. We've lived in a world for so long that says you can't have authority and you can't speak your truth and you can't be powerful if you're emotional. And I think that Casey's message inspires me to say, no, we can actually have some of our greatest impact and greatest power in the world when we speak from an authentic voice that is imbued with emotion and embodiment.
Hear, hear. And by the way, for the listeners, that's episode 18, Casey's episode on Superpower You. And we'll put the link to that as well.
Great. Thank you.
So Lisa, I wanted to jump to this because you hinted at it, and then I'm going to ask the question that I've been dying to ask. But we'll start with my first point. Later in life, you decided to not only jump into dance, but jump into competitive dance. What brought on that inspiration, and talk a little bit about that journey? Because that is, I'm not saying that it's, you can do anything at any age in life. I don't think there's anything later in life, or I believe that you can do what you want to do when you want to do it. But what inspired you to say, this is something I want to take on?
So my kids were starting to get a bit older, and I spent a lot of my brain power and life force energy and time nurturing my kids. My kids are independently educated. They didn't go to school, and I run a pretty large group of over 350 families of people in the Bay Area who are independently educating their kids outside of school as well for academic and intellectual reasons. And so I put a lot of time into that. And when my kids were starting to get older, I happened to be out walking around in my neighborhood one day, and I passed a ballroom dance studio in the neighborhood, and I looked through the window, and it's kind of like one of those moments from that film, Shall We Dance? You know? And I saw these incredible high level Latin dancers, teenagers, who I later found out were very highly ranked in the world, just amazing. And I just looked at them and said, oh my God, whatever they're doing, I want to be able to do that. That looks incredible. Of course, they've been dancing since they were 5, and I was already almost 50. But I did walk into the place, and after a series of events having to do with asking questions and then walking out and then coming back and then buying a cart of 10 and then not using it and then checking out other dance studios over the course of about 8 months, I finally got myself there and took a class and completely fell in love with the type of dance that I was doing. And it was around mid-December, and around December 31st, I wrote out sort of every year I do my year planning and with my goals. And I said, I want to compete in a ballroom dance competition sometime this year. That was the end of 2013, I think. And then about 2 weeks after that, the teacher of that class said to me, you know what, you should compete. I was like, oh, you are not going to believe this. I just wrote that down. I'm in. When do I start? So I basically started training pretty hard for a couple months, and I did my first competition at the end of April of that year. And I just was bitten by the bug hard. And so I think that year I did about 6 competitions. The next year I did about 10. And then, So I just really fell in love with competing and dancing and just the sport. I mean, ballroom dance is a really intense sport. It's it's like any other sport. It's really hard. It's really challenging. And part of that is what makes it amazing. Now, how that came to really be meaningful to me in my life. I live in Silicon Valley. I've been involved in the quantified self movement since its very beginning in 2008, from the first meeting at Kevin Kelly's house. And I've been really involved in people in the Bay Area who are looking at increasing lifespan, increasing longevity. And I know, because I'm around so many scientists, including my husband, people who are really working at curing age-related diseases, that we are living longer and longer lives. And it's occurred to me, especially after I got involved in dance, that we have these much longer lives, but we haven't in our minds, in our mindset, caught up with the idea that we're going to have a much longer age to live in. So we are still operating in our culture in many ways under this idea that, well, once you're 50 or once you're 60, it's too late or you're too old. And I think in being an older dancer, it really made me look at that query, because I started to think, a lot of times, I'm too old. I started too late. All these kids start when they're 5, or if only I'd started when I was 20, or if only I'd started when I was 30. And I just realized, this is a symptom of this misbelief or this old, idea that we haven't quite caught up with, that we have to be a certain age. I decided, you know what? Forget that. I'm going to be a stand for the fact that we can do things, whatever we want at any time.
I love it. I just love it all, because you've embodied your passion your entire lives, and this from your speaking, your acting, to taking on this Superpower You podcast, and obviously competitive dancing and ballroom dancing, which I do know, I agree with you. It is a sport, and it is really challenging and very difficult. And a lot of preparation and time and energy goes into it. So the Thrive Loud community totally loves this, because this is exactly what Thriving Loud is all about. And I love asking the guests on this question, Lisa. The question is, when you have trouble thriving, who or what practice do you turn to get back on the thriving track?
Wow. I love that question, because it really has to do with looking inside to where we actually have a growth mindset, right? And I love growth mindset. I believe in it. I believe that we can always be moving forward. And the reality is that when you're challenged, you're challenged. So I'd have to say that I am a people person. I'm pretty relational, and I reach out to friends and supporters and people who love me and people who are willing to reflect back to me that I'm in the middle of a moment right now and that it will pass. And I find that whenever I'm going through a tough time, and those are the times often when I do lose my mojo and I do lose my focus on what I'm doing, that if I reach out to the people that I know support me, that I get myself, my best self, reflected back to me by those people, because they see me and they can see me and keep holding the vision of who I am and what's possible for me, even when I can't.
I got to tell you, I was a fan of you before we started the podcast, and it just got that much better. Lisa Betts-LaCroix, you rock.
I feel like when we met, it was like, okay, we share a lot here in terms of our orientation in the world.
I think it's great, and I do, and that question is kind of the signature when we try to decode what really makes people thrive. Everyone's got their own personal answer and that authentic way of doing it. And I like that you are a connected person, and getting in touch with those others actually helps get you back on track. So it's good stuff and spot on. Lisa, for the Thrive Loud fans out there, it always comes better when it comes from you. Provide all of the plugs, places people can find you, websites, links, podcasts. We're going to provide it all, but it's better when they hear it from you.
Sure. I would love your listeners to join me at the Superpower You podcast. We can find it on any podcast platform in the Superpower You. It's the letter U, not the word you, although it's a double entendre. You can also find the podcast online at lisabl.com. And I'm at lisabl on most of the social media platforms like Twitter and LinkedIn. You can also join my Facebook page at Superpower You. And I would love to have the Thrive Loud community join me there.
Okay. So Lisa, by the way, thank you for saving this. I'm having too much fun in this interview. I actually I've been smiling ear to ear the entire time I've been doing this. Here's the question that I wanted to add in this mix here. You've been a speaker, you've been an actress, you've been a dancer, you've been basically this life spirit and coach, putting education parts together in where you live. If you get to choose one activity in the day, you only get one to choose. What's the thing you love to do most?
No, don't do that to me.
I'm making you do it. I want to know what you love to do best. I know you're so well-rounded because that's why I'm asking the question.
Oh,
if there was one.
I am just such a generalist, and I thrive on the ability to integrate different areas of my life, different people. I mean, that is my superpower, is bringing ideas and people together and connections between those things. But if you're going to make me pick, like right now, I guess I'm going to have to pick dancing. I have to say I would pick it and I would enjoy it and I would love it, but I would so miss the verbal interaction and the connection with other people. Although you didn't say I couldn't be dancing with other people. So, but even still,
that's true. Yeah.
You know, even if I was dancing with other people, I still really love words and verbal interaction and ideas and abstraction. So I would miss it.
As the Thrive Loud listeners have been able to tell, Lisa also has an amazing voice for podcasting and radio as well. So we've been blessed with that. Of course, we would miss your voice if we had it. I just wanted to put you under the gun to say which one you like. And dancing is beautiful. And I think what you had said in your interview with Casey is such a good point, that the importance of movement and being authentic and utilizing that energy is it's not only a way of communicating, but it's so powerful.
It's a way of connecting, really. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's beautiful stuff. All right. So now the question you've been dreading about, your all-time favorite movie, Lisa.
Okay. I am really resistant to all times and favorites, but
I know.
I'm going to put that detail, that nuance aside and say that one of the movies that I have a bunch of movies come to mind, but the one I'm going to pick is a movie that I saw many, many years ago. And it's one of the movies that I have loved, both the book and the movie, and it is Sophie's Choice.
Oh, yeah.
For me, I'm a huge Kevin Kline fan. I actually got to see Kevin Kline and Blythe Danner in doing Much Ado About Nothing in 1987 in Central Park. And he's such an incredible Shakespearean actor. It just blew me away. It's like he might as well have been just speaking standard English, even though he was speaking classical text. He made it so real and so meaningful. But seeing him in Sophie's Choice, and I've always been a Meryl Streep fan, but seeing the role that they played together and the magic of that romance in that period of time with the gut-wrenching story that it's centered around, and I won't do any spoilers in case people haven't seen it, but I have to say there's something beautifully romantic and deeply tragic and intensely human about that movie that really touches me deeply. And the book is the same, but different. I mean, it's just as powerful, although quite different from the movie. And it's one of those movies that I recommend watching the movie, then reading the book, then watching the movie again, or vice versa. Right? Read the book, then watch the movie, then read the book.
You know, Lisa, I think we've just hit a watershed moment here on Thrive Loud. I always ask this question about what's your favorite movie, what's your all-time favorite movie? One, because it's an easy thing to do and it's a way of doing it. But I think you just opened my mind to something that the way I really need to word the question, because I think you answered it the way that I think we've always wanted it. And that is, what movie has connected with you most in your life? Because that's what it is. You know, your all-time favorite, you might love a movie because it's fun and it's silly or whatnot, but the way you connect with it, and that's why I ask the question, is the ability for a movie to kind of tap into those emotions, just like you as an actor would step into the roles and play them. We're trying to understand how that's affected us and what personal story. I only know this because recently, a good colleague of mine and a former guest on this program actually just recently saw the movie Hamilton, the Broadway show Hamilton, excuse me.
Yep.
And it is transformative. If you haven't seen it, please try to go see it. I know it's hard to do. It's game changing and life changing. And the way you walk out of a theater or the way you walk out of a movie when it actually connects with you is so powerful. That's why I asked the question, because we learn so much about the guest when they answer it just as you did. And we may have to start rewording it in the future. So I want to thank you for that, because that's the way that I think we need to be asking that question on this program.
And I may have to steal that question. I like that.
Hey, it brings out your superpower.
Even though I try.
Feel free.
Well, Lou, I want to just say that you are such a stellar interviewer. It's just been such a pleasure talking with you. And I really appreciate how connected you are with, how connected you have been with me, and just how appreciative and sort of, shedding light on just positive things. It's just such a really lovely conversation. I'm leaving it feeling just wonderful. So that's a big gift.
Lisa, right back at you. And I think our Thrive Loud listeners will really get a chance to see that Lisa Betts-LaCroix is all that and is truly thriving loud every day. So thank you for coming on the show.
Great. Thanks.
And to all the Thrive Loud listeners out there, keep thriving onward and upward. And remember, be brief, be bright, be gone.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. And follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Thrive Loud. Or find us on the web at thriveloud.com.